Let's roll.
All right.
This is Roadmap to Retirement. Tune in for financial tips, investment strategies, and smart money moves to supercharge your retirement savings. Alex Neri, CFP, and guests are here to help you build your roadmap to retirement.
Glad to be back, Alex. I think this is
have you back.
overdue. Lots of questions came in. We had to pick through some of them. Let's kick off with a nice, fun tax one. I know how much you love
tax
that.
questions, sure.
What are some common tax planning mistakes that you've seen this year?
Oh man, you want to pick just one? It's tax season.
Get some.
All right.
Yeah, as you're getting down to tax time.
I think the biggest theme is not planning ahead for your tax needs or even distribution needs. So if I'm talking to somebody that's in retirement, a lot of times it's that lump sum need. I need $100,000 to buy a house or truck or whatever the thing is, and they take out that one big distribution from their retirement plan and they kick themselves for it later. So the right way to do that is if you're planning on buying a house in 5 years, to take out smaller distributions over the course of the next 5 years so you're not paying tax all at once. So I think that's a big mistake. I'll try to think one for younger people too. One for younger people might be putting money into a pre-tax account even if they don't have a lot of income. So for example, if somebody gets out of college, they get the first job making $50,000 and their dad, uncle, neighbor, somebody tells them to put money in their 401k, that sounds like great advice. Now they're saving on a pre-tax basis, when realistically that person's in the 12% bracket and they're probably better off putting money into a Roth, paying tax up front because they're only paying 12% anyway. And then way down the road when they retire and pull that money out, they'll probably be in a higher tax bracket than 12%. And that would be good. Whereas putting money in your 401k to lower your taxable income when you have a relatively low taxable income doesn't make as much sense.
Yeah. Common. Yeah, that's probably the most common,
yes.
I think.
Every time I meet a 25-year-old that's putting $10,000 a year into their pre-tax 401k, I'm like, why are you doing this? And they don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then we eventually figure it out.
Diversifying that way is pretty important as well. I like that. Okay. You said something in there, like taking a big distribution. What about for people who are inheriting money? Tax planning. Just give me a tidbit.
Yeah. So
it's not on here.
It's not on there. That's not a question for okay. If a listener were to ask that, I would say, so if you're inheriting money, there's a couple different ways it can play out. The first and most common is you're inheriting a retirement account from your parent. So mom or dad dies, you inherit their 401k, their IRA, whatever it is. In that situation, you've got that 10-year window to spend the money down. There's a little bit of a lack of clarity about how that works. That's a different conversation. We won't worry about that right now.
Yep.
So in a retirement account, you've got 10 years to spend it. You are paying tax on it. So if you have some control or win in how you spend that money, you can put yourself in a better tax situation. You might be able to offset some of those distributions by putting more into your own retirement account, which if you don't necessarily need the money, but you just have to take it out when you don't want to pay a lot of taxes, that can be a good way to work around it depending on the balance. The other situation is you inherit something that's not a retirement account. So it could be property, it could be a normal brokerage account or individual joint account, whatever it is. In that case, you get a step up in basis. So if I own whatever, my parents passed away and they had Apple stock, now I get to inherit that Apple stock and I get a step up in basis. My cost basis on that stock is now whatever the fair market value was on their date of death. So by doing that, I can now turn around and sell the stock without paying capital gains tax, which if you're listening to this, you're lost on that, go back to some previous episodes where we spell that out a little more clear. But I think to your original question of what should we know about taxes when we inherit money, there's two different situations. Depending on which one's applicable to you, you want to just make sure that you're handling that carefully so that you can pay as little tax as possible.
Yeah. I always get a little fired up when I notice there's a step up in basis. That's just a nice surprise when people are inheriting something.
Yes, it's
a lot more flexibility, a lot of things you can do with that.
Yeah, and a lot of people are worried about this inheritance tax, and they don't really know what that means, but usually they're referring to estate tax, which has a crazy high limit anyway. So
right.
It doesn't affect most people, and I'm not going to put a number on it because it changes every year, but unless you're well into the tens of millions of dollars, you probably don't need to worry about this inheritance tax. If your parents pass away and they leave you $100,000, it's pretty straightforward and easy.
Yeah. That rolls real nice actually into the next question we have here is how can I integrate charitable giving into my estate plan? Somebody asked that.
Yes.
Smart viewer.
There's a couple different ways you can do that. I think my favorite one is something called a QCD, which is a qualified charitable distribution, and a lot of people don't know about that, and it's really only applicable for people that are in their 70s and later, but it allows you to take money directly from your IRA or your 401k give it to a qualified charity, and in doing so, it counts towards your RMD, your required minimum distribution, and it is not taxable, which is a great opportunity. I think that's the simplest way that people can take money from their own net worth, from their estate, however you want to look at it, give it to a charity they care about and get some kind of tax benefit. The other options that used to exist, and there are other options, but unless you are itemizing your taxes, which a lot of people are not with the current tax code, you lose the opportunity to give $1,000 to your church at Christmas and get a tax benefit. So I think the QCD is a nice way to get around that.
Yeah, those are great. That was a good question. Okay. This one came from the Matthew Jarvis episode.
Okay.
It was a good one. You guys talked a lot about kind of industry stuff, but this one was good. What personally can I track to lead myself to a better outcome, financial planning wise?
Yeah, I think you can only improve what you track. There's a saying about that. Whatever you measure is the thing you're focused on. So I think it's probably different for everybody. I think a lot of younger people we talk to, it's about nailing down that budget and trying to figure out how much am I putting towards long-term savings, how much am I putting towards that midterm savings, what do I need to have for an emergency fund? So I think if I'm talking to a couple and they're trying to get on the same page with their finances, I think sitting down and ironing out like what a budget would be, what an ideal scenario would be. And then you don't want to just build that budget once, or just like you don't want to have a one-time financial plan. You want to constantly be reevaluating it. So as cheesy as it sounds, if you and your spouse decide we're going to, on the first Monday of every month after work, we're going to sit down and go through our budget together, which sounds not fun. Find something more fun to do with your time, but make yourself monthly reevaluate your budget, reevaluate your savings goals. And if you're staying on top of it and paying attention every month, you're going to do a lot better than the person they're only thinking about it twice a year when they meet with their financial advisor. I hope my clients are talking about their finances more than just twice a year when they see me, but maybe they're not. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they're
Some of them are. I know some of them are, but I also know there's some people that when they're in my office and we're talking about their financial plan, that is the only time they have thought about financial planning since last time they were in my office.
That might be a good thing, though. That might be a good thing.
I hope it means that they think they're in good hands, and they are, but
Exactly.
Also, as a financial advisor, you know this, you can only do so much.
Right. They need to be engaged.
They need to be engaged. I can't stop them from spending money on dumb stuff. If they want to go spend money on whatever it is, like fun stuff, and we want them to have that, right? If you're doing your financial planning the correct way, you have money built in that to do things you enjoy. But when somebody tells me that I don't know where all my money went, I don't know what happened, like I make $200,000 a year, but I have nothing in my savings account, and I don't know where it's going.
Yeah, that's a challenge. And actually, it's like you read these. How do you navigate working with spouses with two different outlooks on saving and spending? As in, my wife loves to save money and I like to spend it.
Yeah.
That's not true for me. I'm reading
tricky.
This. I'm reading this.
Okay.
Just so
it's not true for you. Great.
It's true, but
I do think it's one of those things that, like, hopefully when you're getting married or getting into a serious relationship, we all know you should talk about money, but most people probably don't. So I think having that like foundational conversation before you wake up one day and you've been married for 10 years, you've got 3 kids, isn't really the best time to start.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's where you are today, then that's where we have to start. So I think having that mature conversation with your significant other is important. Everybody's influenced in the way that they feel about money based on their own childhood, what their parents did, how their teenage years were, like the formative years when you're developing a personality or mindset. So it's not just that like you and I don't agree on money, therefore you're bad and evil. It's that you've had different life experiences than I've had, so we approach it differently. So I think if you can start from a spot of understanding where your spouse is coming from and not painting them as just they're wrong, I'm right, that can be helpful. All that being said, at some point you probably want to be on the same page. So you have to hopefully find things that you agree on. And there might be a part of this conversation that's not for me as a financial advisor to say. It's what you need to figure out, or maybe there's a therapist that gets involved, which I'm not making a joke out of that. I know some great financial therapists, and that's what they do. And they can probably have a different conversation than what I'm going to have with my clients.
Absolutely. And that might just be out of the scope of maybe our conversation, right?
It is, it isn't. Like I can provide some coaching techniques of like how I think you can manage your budget together. But if you have totally different philosophies of one person says, we're all going to be dead someday, so let's just go spend money. And another person is, I want to retire by the time I'm 45, so I'm going to save everything I have. Like those are polar opposites, right?
It's so interesting for me to see the spouses. Just if they're a new client, I can generally figure it out pretty quickly which spouse would be which. But it is so interesting to me how these people must spend a lot of time together, but they have no concept of what each other is doing money-wise.
Here's what we don't want, though, is like you get some people that spouse A and spouse B, they don't agree on money, so they say, screw it, we're just going to do it separately. Like we're still married, and that's great. Maybe we save the marriage by doing this, but now we're managing our finances separately, and it's just there's no way that's as efficient.
Yeah.
Like even if you're going to file taxes together every year, which you're probably going to because you're married, Like the decisions that each person is making with their investments
Yeah.
affect the end tax return. And if we get everybody on the same page, we can pay less taxes, which I think is what both
Most people
want, right?
Most people like that.
So it's if the easy way out is just we don't talk about money, we just have our own separate accounts and do our own thing.
Yeah.
Again, maybe that saves the marriage and that's worth it, but also recognize that you can be better.
I find that works for some people, but it's a very specific situation, I think. But you're right. It can definitely be more efficient. Good. That's another one. How can individuals create a budget? Yeah. That's okay. I'm interested to hear what you say about that. Someone comes in, they're like, hey, we need to figure this out spending wise. We have no idea what we're spending. What kind of tools do you give them or ideas that you might pass on to them that works out well for clients?
Budget's tough because you and I or anybody, I can look at your budget right now and say, Marshall, you're stupid. Why are you spending money on Sabres games? Are a great example.
I go to
You're a
Sabres
fan.
games.
I'm a Sabres fan, but I'm in recovery mode where I've gone to a Sabres rehab and I stopped watching.
I keep the faith. I shouldn't, but yeah.
So that's a good example. I could look at your budget and say, Marshall, why are you spending X amount of dollars on gas to drive to Sabres games? Why are you buying tickets? And I could say, it's stupid, stop doing that. But you say, hey, that's really important to me. I like doing it.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. I'm like, I don't know why it makes me
Doesn't
happy.
make me happy. Yeah.
Budgets is such a unique thing that, to your original question, how do I help my clients with that? I can't sit there and tell you what to spend money on. But what I can say is, okay, you have X amount of dollars coming in each month. We've agreed that we're going to take this percentage off the top, and that's going towards investments, savings, retirement, whatever it is. Now you have X amount of dollars left. We pay taxes. You can go through it and say, your discretionary income every month is $2,000. You tell me what you want to do with it. But if we can sit here in my office today and commit to, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to do this. Hopefully when we get back together in 6 months, like that's still true. If you told me that I'm not going to spend money on Sabres games anymore, and then I see you in 6 months and you're like, hey, I just bought season tickets, there's an issue there. And maybe it's me telling you that, maybe it's your spouse across the table saying, hey, Marshall, you promised that you're going to cut out this unhealthy habit of watching the Sabres play hockey. But you get the idea. So from the advisor standpoint, it's hard, right? I can't tell you what to spend money on, but maybe I can offer some accountability. And maybe I can even give you the peace of mind that it's okay to go to the Sabres games. If I say, hey, Marshall, this is really important to you. Even though other people are going to tell you this is stupid, it makes you happy, go ahead and do it. And now you don't feel guilty.
Yeah.
As much as we want to restrict our budget, I also want to give my clients the clarity and the guilt-free.
Just the confidence. That was the angle I was hoping you'd take there, because I think like when people don't really know when I say, what are we spending money on? And they say, oh, $2,000. It's definitely not true, because where's everything else? So for me, I really like encouraging people to put everything on one like card or whatever you're using, where at the end of each month, you know exactly what you're spending. And then what's not on the card is pretty easily trackable, like RG&E and, your mortgage and things like that, pretty easily trackable. But all those little purchases throughout the week, throughout the month, at the end of the month, when you get the credit card bill or you log in your app and look, knowing exactly what is actually being spent is so important to me. And then you were just describing reverse budgeting, which is exactly what I like people to do, I think, when they're trying to get a handle on this stuff, so that we can say, yeah, you can confidently go ahead and go to the Sabres game if you want to, but you can spend this much money, go out to eat, do whatever you want to do with it. Just because we know next month we're not going to get big surprises and we know what we're doing with our money.
Part of it's just understanding it. I have all these, you meet with somebody from the advisor standpoint, of course, and they make $100,000 a year, and they tell you that their cost of living is I only need $3,000 a month.
Right.
So I make $100,000 a year. I need $3,000 a month, which is $36,000 a year. And they tell you this, and then you get to the end, and their bank account has $1,000 in it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you have $100,000 of income. You have credit card debt, maybe. You're only spending $3,000 a month, but there's still no money left over, which means that you don't have an honest evaluation of how much money you're spending.
Which is not uncommon.
Right? Not at all. I'm not blaming them. It's a funny exercise to go through and realize that the numbers don't add up, what we're doing here.
Okay, so I skipped ahead a little bit, but here we go. We're going to go back. Talk about insurance now.
Perfect.
My work offers a group life insurance plan that I opt into. How do I know if that's best for me, or if I should go get private term insurance? So I'm assuming life insurance.
Yeah, so life insurance. So you have a employer-sponsored life insurance plan. We see, depending on your employer, there's a lot of different versions out there. Sometimes there's the free one that is actually, there's no premium. They just give you like a $10,000 death benefit for working there, part of your benefits. Other times there's elective coverage, which can be, it could still be a flat dollar amount. It might be a $200,000 policy, or more commonly, it might be a factor of your salary. So they're going to say, we give you 3 times your salary as life insurance. And this is where you start to see one that has a premium built into it. So they're going to deduct some amount from your paycheck every pay period or once a month. And that's where you want to be careful. So a lot of times the group coverage is going to be more expensive. So because they're pulling you in with a bunch of other people, there's people in there that are very healthy. There's also people in there that are less healthy. And there's no underwriting, so there's no qualification to get into the plan. So the insurer needs to charge enough on that plan to cover all the people that are higher risk. So if you're listening to this and you're a relatively healthy, relatively young person, it probably is cheaper for you to go out and get a private insurance policy based on your health, not everybody else's. On the other end of it, if you're not as fortunate and you do have some health concerns, health issues, then the group plan might make sense. That is purely from a cost standpoint.
Right.
The other factor in this is, of course, what if I leave my employer? So if you're young and healthy right now, it might be beneficial to lock into a 20 or 30-year term policy. That way, if you do leave your employer, you can take the insurance with you rather than risk being in a situation where you hate your job, you found a better job, but that job doesn't offer the same life insurance benefit, and you can't qualify for whatever reason to get private insurance at that point. And now you have this conversation of, do I stick with a job that I hate that isn't paying me very much because I might die and my family needs the coverage? Which nobody thinks about.
That's
that.
a challenging one.
Nobody's thinking that way when they go through the interview process, but I think having more control is better. So I would generally advocate for having privately owned life insurance if you're in a situation where you really need the insurance. Sometimes you don't. You're just getting it because it's a benefit at work, and you're like, why not? It's $10 a paycheck. I'm not really thinking about it, but sure, let's do that.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think you nailed it. I think those work plans sometimes are a little bit confusing, but if you sit there and read through it, it is pretty obvious why it's free sometimes.
Right. Or not free.
And then you can opt in for a little bit. There's usually like a little bit more where you don't need to go through the health exam. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Which might cost like a couple bucks a paycheck or something like that. I generally tell people to take advantage of those and then just make sure we're insured.
Yeah, let's just make sure it's the right thing. What are the chances that your employer is offering you the perfect life insurance policy that's tailored to your needs?
Just make sure we got the number privately anyway, and then add
that's the other thing. How do you know? Just go run some quotes and find out.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
At the very least, do yourself a favor and find out. If you go through the underwriting process, it comes back, and at that point you feel like the employer plan was better, then sure, go with the employer. But at least,
yeah, definitely be more proactive in it. Okay, perfect. How many more you want here?
I don't know. How many more you got? Any good ones?
I got several. There's some good ones.
All right, good ones.
Okay.
Let's get the bad ones. If you wrote in a bad question,
there's no bad questions. There's no bad questions. There's just wordy questions. Okay. How do you make sure that both your spouses are not your spouses,
both my spouses,
both these spouses are engaged? This person's just. I'm worried about. Yeah, they're worried that they wouldn't be able to get their spouse on board.
Yeah,
how can you help with that?
That's a tricky thing from the advisor perspective. Again, is typically when you meet with a couple, there's one person that sort of takes charge and they're very interested in the stuff, and there's another person that's along for the ride. And I think for a couple, as long as you have one person leading the charge, you're generally okay. The problem is, what if in that God forbid scenario, the spouse that was in charge of all the finances gets hit by a bus, something happens, and then the surviving spouse needs to figure it out. So I try to make a point to get both clients or both people in the couple on board and involved in the conversation. And I don't need them to be experts. I don't need them to really take lead, but I do need them to be aware enough that if something happens, they can step up. I think your question is more asking, how do I get my spouse to care about this stuff if they don't care about this stuff? Is that what it seems like?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. I would say it's hard. If they don't care, they're not going to care. But
what do you personally do as the advisor to try to get both involved?
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily make as much of an effort as I should. It sounds bad, but if both clients are involved in the conversation, I'm happy.
Yeah,
I can't control
like whether physically there.
If you're coming I want you to bring your wife or your husband to the meeting and have them in the room and be involved in all our communication. If I'm emailing you, I'm going to have both spouses on the email so they know what's going on. I don't want anyone in the dark, but I can't force them to be interested.
Yep. Yeah, that's tough. I know it is something where in our industry, right, it is an issue for sure that sometimes both spouses are just not involved. And I actually had a client switch advisors to me because the wife just was saying how the last advisor literally wouldn't look at her in meetings. It was like the most absurd thing ever.
Yeah, there is a bit of a gender stereotype's not the right word, but the finances is
crazy.
Typically the husband handles that, the old school, whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that the modern world's obviously moved away from that. We have a lot of women that are very involved, and that's good to see.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that there's some old school financial advisors that sit in the room with both spouses and talk to the husband and ignore the wife, and that's probably not good.
Okay. Another one here. What are the different parts of Medicare and what do they cover? I'm sure that was in the episode, but why don't you just touch on them really quick?
Yeah, so let's talk about Medicare from the other stand. I think what people need to understand when they're planning for retirement is what they're paying for. So Medicare Part A is the thing that you paid for all these years. That's the quote free part of Medicare. When you get to retirement, then Medicare Part B, C, and D are the ones that you pay a premium for. So Medicare Part B is was it last year $179 a month or whatever it is. The thing to understand about that is the premium that you pay for Medicare is based on your income. So if you had a lot of income in retirement, it's a 2-year look back. So if you're turning 65 this year, they're going to look at your income from 2 years ago when you're 63, and they're going to go to the IRMA table, which is the income related monthly adjusted amount. So based on your income, you might pay more than that 179 per month. So I think people need to understand that and plan accordingly. That's one of the kind of the tax traps that you fall into. If you're retired and you decide you're going to pull a bunch of money out of your 401k in this tax year, 2 years from now, you can expect to have an increase in your Medicare premium. So we want to be very careful about how we do that.
Cool.
How's that?
Pretty good.
Some good questions from our listeners. If you submitted a question, thank you. We'll do this.
No bad questions.
What's that?
No bad questions.
No bad questions, although we did skip quite a few of them, so try to do better. We'll do this probably every 10 episodes or so going forward, so look forward to having Marshall back to answer some questions.
Can't
Or
wait.
ask some questions. Jeez.
Can't wait.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Alexander Neri. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Alexander Neri or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Alexander Neri and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.